Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku network. Live from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America, right here in the Research Triangle Park, near Duke and Carolina, if you watch basketball, that is. Now, today, I wanted to share with you wishing everyone a happy President's Day. Today in the United States is President's Day, where we honor the service of those individuals who answered the highest call of their nation to serve in the presidency of the United States of America. When George Washington was first elected President of the United States, he said that he was so blessed to be the highest citizen of the nation, the citizen of the United States. Even though Washington was offered to be king, he decided that the presidency would be the place where he could lead. And it was a revolutionary concept at the time that one of us, a citizen of the nation, would serve and lead the country. Not one of royalty, not one of extreme wealth, but just a citizen of the United States. And so the tradition began. Today, there have been 46 presidents of the United States. They each have had their own set of crises, their personalities, their own charismas that have been able to get them through tough times, inspire the nation, bring us together. And yes, there have been some great presidents, there have been some bad presidents, and there have been a few in between. Some of the top and recent research that I've show Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt as the top three presidents. And many presidents actually will do better over time because the presidency, after they leave the presidency, history will sometimes be kinder to them as they look back. Just yesterday, I watched on CNN the documentary on LBJ. Very interesting to see how he was able to use the presidency and changed a bit, even his personality and his leadership style when he became the president, first through the tragedy of John F. Kennedy's assassination, but then elected in 1964, leading the initiative, the Great Society. And you see, that's what it's all about at the end of the day. I started thinking last night that every president usually had something that they were about. You had the New Deal from Franklin Roosevelt. You had the New Frontier from John F. Kennedy. You had the Fair Deal from Harry S. Truman. And from Lyndon Johnson, you had the Great Society. Barack Obama said, yes, we can. Trump said, make America great again. And perhaps that's one of Biden's biggest challenges. It's hard for him to get around what his presidency stands for. What is it about? But I'll end with this. I do believe that we have emerged into an era where it's now becoming the imperial presidency, where we often give the president more power than he deserves. And hopefully one day it'll be a she. We must remember that the president can't solve all our problems. The president can't just use a magic wand and make the economy get better or end wars. But what the president can do is communicate a message to the nation, to all of the nation, not even the ones who didn't vote for him, that he is our president. He or she is our commander in chief. And they have all taken one oath, every single one of them, that is the same oath, that they do solemnly swear to faithfully execute the office, the presidency of the United States, and that they will, to the best of their ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of our nation. That, my friends, is the same oath of office taken to all 46 presidents of the United States. And one thing is absolutely certain. Whoever the next president is will take the same oath. And they will be dealing with many challenges. But all we can do and hope and pray is that the republic of our nation will always be grateful for their service. Now, with us today, we have Mark Lee. And we have Chris.
Yep. And we've got some others as well. Of course, we've got our good friend from Canada, as well as being a master chess player and all of that. So glad that he's here. As a matter of fact, I understand he's got a new show that's going to be coming on that'll be dealing with international politics in the very near future. As a matter of fact, the first show may be this Tuesday, if I read correctly, and all of that. So definitely looking forward to seeing that, Sasha. I know that you'll be giving some great insight into the field of international politics, something that has definitely get a lot of attention throughout the decades, but definitely over these last several weeks for sure, and all of that. So I know I'll be watching. I hope others will be as well. So I think at some point Nick and Shaquille may be joining us also.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, we have now an extraordinary situation in Europe. There could be a first big war since Second World War, and now there are some diplomacy efforts, but it runs really much deeper than that, and very serious analysis of what's happening. And even if it's a peace today, it doesn't mean that it will last really, because Putin is very passionate about his mission, and he'll make anything and everything to accomplish that. So even if West will buy his goodwill for foreseeable future, nobody knows how long this future would last. Chris, what are your thinking about this new show, and what would you like to tell us?
Okay. Well, it's interesting, Sasha, that what I heard this morning was what I heard you say is about international politics. And it is funny. It is funny you say that, because I sometimes think international and politics is kind of an oxymoron. There's this political overture, but really, it all comes down to a couple of things in Europe, right? It comes down to hegemony. Right. In other words, I want to make sure I keep the territory I have and the people that I have, and I want to make sure that they're, as satisfied as possible within the confines of what's going on. Right. And also, you have to understand the history. Like I've told you before, Europeans have a very long memory, as we should have. And what I wanted to bring up this morning with Ukraine, and when we get to Ukraine, I'll be more than happy to bring it up. But I wanted to bring up Poltava. And Poltava is in the Ukraine. But I wanted to point out a deceit, a deceit that the Soviets did to us in World War II that not just cost us lives, and because we were the Allies, but also cost us technology, which they stole from us as a result of this deceit. Now, there's a whole book on this called Deceit of Poltava. You can read it if you want. It's just very eye-opening. But I think it'll show you that when the French, when Biden and and Putin said, we agree in principle, those are three words that means we're not going to do what you want. If Putin says, if any Russian, not including you, of course, Sasha, but if any Russian, you're an expatriate, but if any Russian said to me, I agree in principle, that means I don't agree. That's what it means. So basically, they're saying we agree in principle, which means you can say whatever you want, and we'll agree in principle, and we'll nod our heads, and at the end of the day, we'll do what we want.
The deception takes several forms, and one of them happened in 1994 with the Budapest Memorandum, where Ukraine gave up the third largest nuclear force in the world to Russia. For what? For the guarantees of Russia, UK, and US that its territory will not be jeopardized and no attack on Ukraine will ever happen. Two things.
Before
Ukrainians are very naive.
Sorry about that. I hijacked you,
Ukrainians
Steve.
are
Sorry.
very naive, number one. Number two, UK and US were very happy to manage a nuclear force which left from the Soviet Union will be in one country, not in four or even just two, Russia and Ukraine. So they would have to deal only with Russia. Ukraine and all the other things is real garbage, and there is nothing really to be concerned to deal with that or so on. So US and UK deceived Ukraine to achieve their own goals. And Ukrainians were very, very naive. The people like that should not govern the nation, the country, or whatever. But that happened. Now comes 2022, Zelensky in Munich. Here is what he said. He said, under the circumstances, Ukraine, to guarantee its territory, needs nuclear arms and as quickly as possible. And Ukraine has technology, willpower, and they can have nuclear arms in a matter of few months, providing that they will have a will. Technology, resources is there.
Yes, and real quickly, guys, before we get into the other issues, just a real around the room about President's Day, even if you're not living in the U.S. But we'll start with Chris, and then Mark, and Sasha, just and Nick, and of course Shaquille. Just what to think about on President's Day today. I mean, the point I was trying to make on my monologue is that it's just a unique club, and each president's had their strengths and weaknesses. But does seem to be an imperial presidency where the presidency over time has gotten more and more power, and they've got access to nuclear arsenal, military, all the forces. They can enter into treaties and agreements. Don't you believe that the presidency has become very powerful today, and that we sometimes put too many expectations on them? I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you, Chris. Start with you.
So what I've come is from the perception. My perception has been through the Department of Defense. So and housing and human services. Okay, both of those, because I was a federal government employee for Social Security for many years, and then Department of Defense I was military and civilian. So what I'd like to say is this: is that the presidency, like for instance, okay, I served through Carter, Reagan, H.W. Bush, and Clinton. And then I said, that's enough. I'm done. And I retired. I retired before I came up for colonel. It was like, I'm kind of done with the club. I'm off. So I came out in 97. So basically what happened is that I saw Carter, to me, as I look back, Carter was, and arguably so, was to me the most honest president. And now, was he competent? Well, I think he could have been, but he surrounded himself with really kind of not very competent people, one of which was a Department of Defense guy, Harold Brown. So he didn't do too well in that area. He had a lot of problems. He had the Afghanistan invasion. He had the Iranian hostage crisis. He had the Iranian hostage rescue, of which I was a part, by the way. I was part of the intelligence on that. And when you fail something like that, when you fail it, I really felt bad about that. I mean, even though I was kind of on the periphery of the whole thing, but when he came on the next day and said, that was my call, it was my responsibility, and I take personal responsibility for that. I have, very rarely does a president come up and say, hey, I'm the fall guy on that whole thing. And so that was an interesting situation. Then Reagan came in, and Reagan, to me, was, kind of the Iran-Contra affair kind of put a kibosh on his honesty aspect. But the bottom line is that he did give us a great pay raise, and he was the consoler in chief. When Beirut fell, when the Marines, 214 were killed in Beirut in 1983, he had a hangar set up for all the families. And I watched that. I watched this guy go from family to family, cry with them, hug them, listen to them. He was just amazing. He did it for every single 214 families in that hangar. That was absolutely amazing. And then George H.W. Bush, after that, he was a great guy. Again, not much of a vice president. George H.W. Bush, I think he kind of failed in the vice president's selecting his vice president, but he wanted the conservatives, so that's why he did what he did. And whatever. So then he had the Kuwait situation, and man, he handled that. To me, it was great. Now, did he handle it? No, Schwarzkopf handled it. But he said, "Look, I don't care how much you need. Whatever you need, you get, and that we're going to go in and we're going to free Kuwait." And that's what he did. And then Clinton came into being, and he had one of the poorest, the sloppiest, the worst Department of Defense guy ever in Les Aspin. Les Aspin was a senator from Wisconsin, and this sucker every year he would come out with the Golden Fleece Award, and he would always award it to the Department of Defense. And then Somalia happened, and they asked again and again and again for tanks and for armor. He said no. Somalia fell had all kind of issues. He had a heart attack and died. And I mean, it's like, are you kidding me? So then he tried Cohen, he tried some other ones, Cap Weinberger is Department of Defense. So there's a long history of this whole thing about it's not the president who always comes off as being strong, although they take that yes and no, but it's the defense, it's Department of Defense and Department of State. Those two cabinet members are you got to select them well. You got to do well on that. If you do well on those two things,
and I think, and I might have said it in my monologue, but there was that famous quote by Jefferson that said, "No man comes into this office with a reputation as good that carried it will leave this office with a reputation as good that carried it into it." So, and this notion that the presidents were selected, even though they were elected. But real quickly, let's go to you, Mark Lee, and then Sasha and Nick and Shaquille. Just your thoughts about President's Day. What we need to remember. What does this day mean? How do we use it to remember our presidents?
Well, one thing, we've got that great event later on this evening where we'll be talking about the worst presidents, and we'll crown one, and it may be an upset in the making. Me and Nick have talked about this as the polls have been coming in, and there definitely may be an upset in the making, and who knows, maybe it will have an asterisk on all of that and things along those lines. So the people that everybody's been thinking might be winning might not be the winner after all. So we'll find out when y'all tune in and things along those lines. But one thing that I would observe is that if you look at the early presidents, a lot of them came from very humble upbringings. Even if they were in the part of the elite, they still had some humble upbringings, whether that was George Washington, whether that was Lincoln, whether that was a number of other ones. And even as we went into other time frames, even if we went into like the Great Depression and things along those lines, and then there was a time frame where they might have come from more elite kind of backgrounds, whether that was a number that came as governors, Reagan being the one. Of course, definitely there was others that were involved in politics, such as Carter, and such as definitely Mr. Clinton, and others that were in there as well. One of the things that I would notice and observe, and I'd love to hear what Chris's thoughts about this are, is that more recently there have been people that have wanted to attain that office, have wanted to get to that office, and I don't know that they necessarily understood the kind of avenues that they would have to go through. And he gave a great history of what happened with the Department of Defense. But I would argue that there are some people that didn't know even how to create a good housing department or a good other kinds of departments that came in from the social justice kind of level, even if they came from the grassroots kind of society. Obama definitely was a grassroots organizer and definitely did a great deal of work in that field in the area of Chicago. But I don't know that he really understood what he was getting into when he got into the presidency, even though he had some political offices as well. So that's something that I sometimes think about when I think about even folks that want the job today, whether they are coming out of the world of politics or whether they're coming out of the world of grassroots activism or whether they're coming out of whatever their roots are. Do they actually understand the weight of what they have to have when they do that? Because there's a lot of weight with the presidency. I know it's a job I would not want, but definitely, even though I might want some other local politics offices, I would not want to be the president of the United States. But it is one that carries a lot of weight with it, and that is definitely seen by folks around the globe, both for what we are doing internally as well as what we are doing externally as well. So a lot of people will pay attention to our relationship with our allies, our adversaries, and even those that may not fall into actually either one of those categories, but they have kind of things that we may need in our society. I know that, we think about Africa. Africa's got a lot of lithium. And I was just recently on a show where they were pointing out that the majority of the iron in society is actually in that whole area of the Ukraine, which might be part of the reason that folks may be interested in that area even now. And I was not even aware of that until I was doing some studies on that. So that's just some of my thoughts about the importance of the presidency. And I do think that it is a vital office that we need to pay more attention to. And to come to one of Nick's points, and then I think you may be tossing it to Nick, is I've had conversations with people about civic pride and whether we are learning enough about the civic pride and even our own constitutional rights and our own things that are at our disposal that a lot of us don't know about. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a teacher yesterday, and she was actually saying that yes, the schools, or a former teacher, I should say, yes, the schools need to be aware of teaching those things within civic and all of that, but we also need to make sure that the parents are also doing their part as well, because you can't just throw it on the schools if the parents aren't backing them up. And on that note, I'll see what Nick's got to say, since it appears that Steve has checked out for a second.
Oh, President's Day. This is exciting. This is
Sasha next.
Well, we got the Americans first, then we'll invite our international friends on. And you know what? Let me tell you something. The people in Australia are just so excited over there that President's Day in the United States is taking place. The people in Canada are out there parading because President's Day is taking place in the United States. The people that are coming in from Ukraine.
They wish they had the same sort of system where they don't have a dictator Trudeau in charge.
Well, that's true. The people we're beaming to right now in Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, and Algeria are just so excited. It's President's Day in the United States. There's nothing can be better than President's Day in the United States. I'll turn it to my friend Shaquille, who hasn't had a chance or opportunity to tell us how much the celebrations are going on right now in Australia for President's Day in the United States. Shaquille, tell us what you're planning to do.
Well, to be fair, I was supposed to go last. Steve very graciously put me last in the group, so I think Sasha should go first.
Maybe Sasha. Okay,
Sasha, you have lived under one dictator, and now in 2022 you are living under another dictator. So I think we should let you go before me when it comes to the President's Day.
Well, I'm sure they're excited in Canada, and the parades are happening right now in Ottawa about President's Day in the United States, right?
Truckers.
Truckers. They're bringing the American flags out, right, Sasha?
I'll tell you one thing. In my opinion, the era of great presidents in the United States has passed and gone. Right now, the presidency is in a deep crisis. It's not the most potent leader is elected to become a president. No. It's a party who raises more money. It's a party who gets oiled social media platforms and guns all propaganda, whether it's true or it's half true or it's outright lies. But it doesn't matter if it serves the purpose and get your party, your man elected. That's what works. And this is right now, the United States presidency, I believe, is in a deep crisis. And I think there should be more potent candidates supported by really people of the United States to get out of this. Whether it will work next time, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is that, before my interjection is that, I think that there are always checks and balances in our system between the executive, the legislative, the judicial branch. But there's been times where the presidency over the time has received more and more authority. And that's what's the whole notion of the imperial presidency. And we often say it's the most powerful person in the world. But is that really, really true? What do we mean when we say the president is the leader of the free world, right? But over time, in my opinion, it's going to get harder for the president to govern effectively, because now what's happened is with all of these social media and everything, half of the country is saying, well, that's not my president. And then the other half is saying that's my president. So, and will we have and today's Black and Black History Month, we do want to honor Barack Obama, who was the first Black president on this President's Day and Black History Month. I did highlight him in my city newsletter, but I think that's important to acknowledge the fact that, Barack Obama was the first president of color. And you've got now Kamala Harris, the first vice president of color. Black, and Asian. But anyway, any final thoughts before we move on? Happy President's Day to everybody.
Well, I was wondering if people in Canberra were celebrating Happy President's Day. Oh, yeah,
Are we-
Shaquille, yeah.
Are we skipping past me?
No,
You
we're not
put
going to
me
pass
past,
you.
now we're
I
skipping
want to
past me.
hear. I want to hear about the celebrations in Sydney. Are you guys
Oh,
doing fireworks?
we've had fireworks going on in the
That's what I
harbour,
thought.
all sorts of things. No, I just want to address a couple of things. So, firstly, if I can just say, Steve, how could you possibly give credit to Trump for Make America Great Again? That was Ronald Reagan that came up with that. Trump stole it from him.
Did he
So-
really? That wouldn't surprise me.
No, look, I will say, I think that the leader of any country should be, the prior leaders of any country should be celebrated by the people in that country. And President's Day, to be honest with you, I actually had forgotten all about it because, I'm not American, I'm an alien. But a documented alien, but an alien nonetheless. But I do think we should celebrate people. And I think that we should always hope. Because in politics and when you go to vote, you're not always going to get the result that you're hoping for. That's just life. And I think we should always try to encourage and pray that the presidents of America, that political leaders around the world are going to do well and that they're going to get good results. I want us to talk about Biden just briefly, though. I think Biden's actually in a better position than he looks like because the polls are terrible. Everything looks really bad. But the Republicans have done something that in a game of chess, I would throw this straight back at them. So what the Republicans have done is they've linked up with the Libertarians, essentially. And what they've done is they've just complained about anything that government does. Look at the Democrats. The Democrats are going to do this. They want to control this. They want to control that. Now, when Donald Trump was the president, what's his name? Acosta, whatever his name was, from CNN,
Yes.
was giving Donald Trump a hard time. And Donald Trump turned around, flipped it around and said, well, what do you suggest I do? So if I was on the Democrats' side now, and if I was Joe Biden now, I'd be saying back to the Republicans, well, you've criticized us for doing this, this, and this, which is easy to do. It's always easy to criticize what you did do, not what you didn't. What exactly would you propose we should have done? We won the election. What exactly would you Republicans say we should do? We're supposed to govern. You guys just want everybody to just do things themselves and people to make their own decisions. What would you have us do? So Biden has actually got a little bit of ammunition there that he can throw things back at the Republicans. The problem is he's a fairly poor communicator, has been for a while, and he's not pushing that out, but neither is the White House. Jen Psaki's not doing it. There's nobody out there really defending what the Democrats have done. So it looks like they're trying to do things by force. Now, many people have talked about, you brought up, Chris, about Carter. Now, a lot of people will say he was a terrible president. He's one of the worst, this and that. But nobody's ever really accused him of being a mean-spirited person or a nasty person. Everybody has said that he was a nice man and did a lot after his presidency and sort of still does, do a lot of things after his presidency for the country. Now, talk about the failure in the Iranian hostage rescue. Was that called Eagle Claw?
Desert One.
Desert One, but that was part of Operation Eagle something or other, from memory. Yeah. Was it Eagle Claw? I think it's Eagle Claw. I'm going to bet on that one. Okay. Eagle Claw, I think is what it was. Look it up. I don't know. I'm probably wrong.
That's okay.
But what would okay, so it failed. Yes, it did. But I mean, this is before I was born, but didn't one of the helicopters have a cracked rotor? And there was all sorts of things that went wrong.
But now, you're right.
Now, what would a Republican president have done differently in that set of circumstances? So it's really easy to go back and go, you did this, you did that, those things were wrong. What was the alternative? So I think when it comes to celebrating presidents, not just past presidents, but even the current one, I think it's important to focus on what are they trying to achieve and what they are actually doing. And it's important because you've got to have some patriotic faith. Look, we here in Australia had a prime minister, had several actually, but had prime ministers when I was an adult that I really disliked. And then I met the person. And it was the worst thing because I really, really liked this person as a person, really liked them. But I just didn't like the policies. And there was no way that I was going to go and hope that that individual did really poorly. I was always going to hope that that person did a great job as Prime Minister. So, I think that if you don't have that capacity, if you don't have the ability to help somebody who might help somebody, pray for somebody, do whatever you can for your country under the leadership of somebody who you don't necessarily agree with, then you really are doing a disservice to your country. And I think that Biden should come out from under that. Biden should come out and throw it back at Republicans. That's what I would do if I was a Democrat. I'm never going to forgive him for Afghanistan. I've said that before. I would never forgive him. But leaving that aside, just on political strategy, that's what I think they should do. Now, Steve, what I will just say as well, Barack Obama became the president of the United States fair and square, right? He won that election. He's the first president of color. That should absolutely be acknowledged. The reason why I get so antsy, I get such a bee in my bonnet about things, is I don't feel the same way about Kamala Harris. And the reason why I don't is because the rule was I will only take a person of color as the VP. And how I view that personally, as somebody who has at least some shared ethnicity with her, is it negates any kind of acknowledgement of what her achievements are. So Fox News, for example, a more right-wing news organization, can talk about she was a terrible prosecutor, she did this, she did that, she locked people up for, an ounce of marijuana or whatever, and they did life sentences. What a horrible person. And you can't get out of it because all the Democrats will do is go, but she's a person of color, you've got to like her. I don't want that. I would hate for somebody to say, look at Shaquille. I don't know if I am, but look at Shaquille. He's the first person who ran a hedge fund in Liechtenstein. Of color. I would hate for somebody to say that. That is not the defining characteristic of me. Obama won that election fair and square. It doesn't feel fair and it doesn't look fair. And the optics are important when you say, I'm only going to have a person of color as the VP, or I'm only going to have a woman of color as a Supreme Court nominee. It doesn't look fair, and it negates that person's achievements. That's why I'm so heavily against it.
Shaquille, I've got a couple of quick questions for you and everything, and then one is actually involving your lovely country as well. But one, I was going to say, I don't know, and there's two separate questions, one based on what you just said, and the other is going to come to something going on in Australia. But the question I was going to ask is, those people that are of, let's say, a ethnicity that Kamala shares and everything, and they are proud and they are using that as a means to look up at her and maybe admire her and maybe even think that they might want to achieve that same kind of goal. Is that all right with you? Because I do know that there are quite a few women that are members of the sorority that she belongs to. And I believe that that's the AKAs, if I remember correctly, and everything, because it's between the AKAs and the Deltas, those being the two most prominent ones. But I think she's an AKA. She may be a Delta. But either way, those folks are oftentimes looking up to her. And there are even some young students at some of our historical HBCUs that are going like, there was never a chance of me ever being a vice president. I never thought that I could be a vice president. Now I've got somebody that I have seen as a vice president that is sharing some of my common heritage and some of my common sorority heritage as well. Therefore, maybe I will go ahead and try to run for city council or run for state government and maybe even eventually run for national government and things along those lines. So that's where I think some people might be looking at her as something of a role model that they might want to then follow up on as well. So that was just my first point. Then I was going to ask you about Australia, because we're oftentimes talking about what's going on in other foreign governments and how they've influenced elections and things along those lines. We know what happened with Russia and the US, and we know what's happened there. And I just recently learned that apparently China is trying to do a lot of crazy things over there in Australia, firing and doing laser incidences. So Chris may have some thoughts around this as well. And apparently they are thinking that may be one of the weaker standpoints of the the nations that are allies and everything is going after Australia. And they are actually saying that this could be the closest attempt at military intimidation by China. So since you were there in Australia and you are our Australian guest, I'd love to know your thoughts and what you've been hearing about this.
Well, the US military, as Chris will I'm sure, acknowledge, when they're in the field, they know that we provide our military service personnel with much better food and much better conditions and much better equipment. If America ever wants to try to suggest that we, Australia, are the weak part of the Five Eyes nations, we might just give them a slap. And I might just remind you that the last time you guys took on the Commonwealth, we burnt your White House down. So that's not the second bit. The first bit, that was over Canada, so don't touch them. They're ours.
Well, we burned Canada's White House down too.
So we're going to talk about
them first.
Hang on, so the first bit that you said, which was about skin color, let me just address it like this. In the first place, I've got some nieces. I'm an only child, but I call them my nieces. They're my cousin's daughters. They don't view it like that, and they're very young. They're under 10 years old. They don't view it like that. And if they ever did, I wouldn't be very happy about it. And the reason I wouldn't be happy about it is because when you achieve something and you rest on your own laurels and you're the first person to achieve something, that's awesome. You've done it. You've achieved it. Okay? But I don't know. Has any Ukrainian immigrant to Canada ever climbed Mount Everest? I don't know. Maybe not. But I can tell you that if I took Sasha on a helicopter and dropped him on the top of Mount Everest, and he says, look, I'm the first one that's up there, what achievement was that of Sasha's? Would any other Ukrainian immigrant to Canada go, wow, some other person of my ethnicity went up to the top of Everest? He didn't climb it himself. He was taken up there on a helicopter and dropped there, but look, he was there. That's the problem. What you've done is you've actually taken away any pride that anybody could have in her achievement because you said, only somebody of this skin color, blah, 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 can have this job, which clearly implies that without that assistance, they wouldn't be able to make it. And that has got to be one of the most insulting things that anybody could do to people of our skin color.
Shaquille, can I just interject just for a moment? Because I'm Italian American. My father was Italian. He worked. He was in the Navy in World War II. Then he's got his master's degree. He got his master's degree on the GI Bill, and then he started working as an hourly worker at Aluminum Company of America in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. He was an hourly worker. He went to his boss and he said, "Look, I know you guys are looking for executives. I have my master's degree. I'd like to go ahead and do the executive job." The guy looked at him and he says, "Floyd, you're a Dago. You're a WAP. Your place is down there on the assembly line. That's where you belong. That's where you do well. That's where you need to stay." And my father said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to go above your head." He went above the guy's head and said, "Look, I want to be part of the executive program. I'll put in an application, whatever else, but I have a master's degree. This is what I do." Now, it's 1940s. So he goes, and the guy says, "Okay, I'll tell you what, Floyd, we're going to put you in as a nomination. But if you screw up, if you do one thing wrong, if there's one thing that you cannot do, you're out, and there will never be another Italian ever in this executive program." So my father, he went in there, and you know what happened is there was a guy, a white guy, who sat there and said, "Floyd, if you want to be an executive, you got to look like an executive. Enough with the white shirts and the black ties and the white socks and whatever else." He helped him to achieve what he needed to achieve. And you know what happened? My father ended up being an executive. He ended up being an executive vice president for Alcoa subsidiary. As a result of him doing that, there was a president of Alcoa who was an Italian American, and he said, "I owe this to Floyd Greco, who ended up paving the trail for me." But it wasn't just my father. And my father was more than happy to say, other people helped me to achieve this. And he said that when he retired, and he said that all the way through. I think that's what you're getting to, Shaquille. I think you're getting to that. That's basically true and honest. But let me tell you something. Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. She was a lawyer. She made her way up there. I mean, she had to be in a spot where you use that as a springboard to be able to do what needs to be done. So that's all I'm saying.
And
I agree with you.
I agree. Just really quickly along those same lines. Hold on.
You'd be so much prouder of your father because he fought to get there than what you would be if you retold that story and said, "My father went up there and the boss said, you know what, we don't have any Italians in executives, so therefore, because you're Italian, I'm going to give you the job." And that's essentially what's happened with Kamala Harris. That's why I'm saying it's insulting, in my opinion. Now, other people like Steve and Mark don't feel insulted by it. I'm apparently a person of color. I don't describe myself that way, but I'm a person of color with a shared ethnicity with her. And I find that to be really insulting, that we make a big deal over her skin color and we don't actually talk about her achievements. Now, I don't agree politically with a lot of her positions, but that's besides the point. There's lots of people I don't agree with who I respect. Obama, for example, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but I respect the man. All right. I think he was a good president. But when you take away their achievements and just focus on skin color, it means nothing. And I think that that is the height of insulting. And I've achieved a lot. I've worked a lot. I've had to fight and bite and scratch my way up to the top. And I don't want that to be minimized down to, look, Shaquille's not white. What a great achievement that is.
But Chris, and Shaquille, along those same lines, and I'm just going to share a story that involves my own journalism career and everything. There are some folks that will be your worst enemies that can also be in your same ethnicity. I remember, and I've talked to Nick because he's got some experience about Boca Raton. Boca Raton is a very elite place. So I went to work for the Boca Raton News. There was one
Did you really?
Yeah, I went to work at the Boca Raton News.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
when were you at Boca Raton News?
That was in the late 80s, early 90s. But while I was in the Boca Raton News, there was one African-American gentleman that was there and everything. And I can tell you that that gentleman was the worst ally that I have ever had, because he was actually doing everything possible to make sure that it was not going to be a successful endeavor for me. And I was not there that long. I was there less than a year and everything, because he was actually doing a lot to derail, because he liked to be in the big fish in the small pond, because that is actually a small pond compared to like Fort Lauderdale and Miami and other places. So he liked to be in the big fish there. And whether it was me or whether it was, there was a woman, a reporter who I believe was of Hispanic descent, if I remember correctly, but he was giving us the worst case of not being a good ally, because he was trying to derail us any way that he could, because he liked being that big fish in that small pond, and is one that's involved in finances. I'm sure you've seen that even in your own career, Shaquille, where there are folks that are like that.
Which is why I took such gumption when you told me after the election of President Biden that I should like Kamala Harris because she has the same ethnicity as me. So there was, I think, the world's worst documented serial killer is Indian. So should I like love that person as well and say, well, they're the same ethnicity as me. Look how much respect I've got. They killed more people than anyone else. I mean, this is just such a nonsense kind of.
Well, I think, Shaquille, it's more nonsense to the younger generation, but you get the older generation. They are very ethnic and very racist. I mean, the thing is, and I don't think Biden is a young Ashkenazi. So when you look at his statement, I'm going to support. I am going to appoint a black female, and he in two statements. He made a racist statement and a sexist statement, and wrapped it all into one. Sent it out there to the Democrats, and they go, "Yay!" And I'm going like, "Guys, I thought you were liberals. You should say boo. You should say boo to you." But no, they're not liberals. They're racist and they're sexist. And there's no other way you can get around it. I mean, history will show he's a racist, sexist Carter president. I mean, the guy is
history won't show that. People,
history will. It just takes a long time.
Especially the very wealthy people. They say, I'm going to leave a legacy. Someone tell me the most difficult decision, the most morally complex decision that the original Rockefeller made. You don't know. You weren't there. People forget. Yeah, all that happens is you just become a name in a book that happened hundreds of years ago. There's no legacy.
Well, there'll be some historians.
Do we really know? Steve talked about Abraham Lincoln being one of the top three presidents. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. I know that a lot of Southern separatists that still exist still believe that he was one of the worst. The newspaper articles from that time, the polling from that time shows that actually he was really unpopular, even amongst his own party. And in fact, there was somebody, I think it was a Republican, who actually said that he was the only person that became more popular after he was assassinated than what he was when he was alive. Abraham Lincoln, from a lot of people, especially the Southern separatists, those guys hated him. And I believe for good reason. Also, he just went with whatever direction the political wind was going in. He just changed his mind all over the place. Now his legacy is the emancipation of the slaves. I'm not going to take that away from him because I don't think we should shit on someone's legacy. But what really happens today and how that's going to be remembered 100 years from now, how it's going to be remembered in 10 years from now. Sure. Who knows?
Well, if you read the History of American Catholicism, that book, it states very specifically that Lincoln wrote letters that said, look, if I have a choice between the South separating from the United States and slavery, I will pick slavery. If they secede, we're going to fight and we're going to free the slaves. If they do not secede, I will not fight slavery. That's what he wrote. I'm not just gisting this. This is the history of the American Catholicism. You can look it up. So basically, that's what the situation was. And the South was going to secede. So boom, that's what he did. And then he realized, look, I can do something here that will be for the benefit of all the United States. I'm going to do it. So he did it, But I mean, let's go back to Harry Truman. Harry Truman, for a brief period, but it is fact, was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He paid for membership. He was going to be a member, and he decided not to be a member because the head of that said, look, you have a mentor here who's a Catholic. You can no longer associate with that Catholic. And he said, you know something? I don't want to be part of your organization. Give me my $10 induction fee back.
Oh, really? Got his money back.
And he got his money back.
Good for him.
For $10. So, but I mean,
who would have known that the KKK had a refundable trial period? That's brilliant.
Anyway, but I mean, the bottom line is
maybe you can join. Maybe they need members, Shaquille. You could join. They need members.
But
they're lacking membership.
He ended up integrating the military. He did a lot of things that this country was good. That was good for this country. So bottom line is how is history going to judge that? They're going to judge it from the up.
Well, it's interesting because
you say it's good for the country because hey, the country remained in existence, but was it really good? I mean, the South suffered from enormous, what I consider to be abuses from the northern states, especially when it comes to taxation. And the abolitionists of the North never worried about whether or not the slaves should be compensated, which apparently is still something that's being argued about today with BLM saying they want reparations. This could have been dealt with better back then. Abraham Lincoln's intention, his stated intention when he went into the South was not to emancipate the slaves. He wanted to make sure the South did not secede. And the Supreme Court should be ashamed of itself, historically ashamed of itself, for trying to say, or not for trying to say, for saying that you cannot secede from a union that you voluntarily entered, where you were never told that you were not allowed to leave. You cannot secede from it. We're going to make sure that you pay all the taxes, but secession is not something you can do. And then immediately turn around and tell West Virginia that they can secede from Virginia. How
Shaquille's not going to let me have my money from reparations. I'm upset about this. Shaquille's not going to let me have my money from reparations.
Well, I gave my Black History person. Before we leave, do you have another one you want to talk about, or we'll do it tomorrow?
Well, no, I actually was going to defer to my good friend Chris and everything because he came up with two great people just like he did last week. So I'm actually going to defer to him because I think these are two amazing folks. But before I get to those and everything, I did have a quick question for Nick. I want to know, and it's a legal question because I saw that Donald Trump has launched his new social media venture, True Social. It just launched on Apple's App Store, making the former president's return to social media after he was banned from several platforms last year. But, we had a guest on not that long ago that has this thing called TrueSo. It stands for Truly Social. And, that sounds very close to True Social. I want to know, can Matthew have a suit? Can he win a case against Donald? Does he stand any chance? Because True Social, Truly Social, True So, they sound very close to me and everything. And I think Matthew is actually ahead in terms of doing it first. Great
question, Mark, but I can't give legal advice over the air. So unfortunately, I'm still a member of the Florida bar. I'm doing my 33. They got me 33 hours of continuing education credits. Part of it will be ethics, and part of it is lawyers can't give free, unsolicited legal advice to third parties. So with that, I will not opine on that, but it'll be a very interesting thing to follow.
Steve, as Mark didn't,
I can give financial advice because I'm not a financial
as Mark didn't actually question about Black History Month, I'm going to give it a go.
No, I just said I was deferring to Chris. I said I was deferring to Chris.
Which I'm stealing from Blake A. Christian, who has retweeted or requoted something from Municipal Court Judge at Milwaukee Municipal Court, Derek Mosley, who has saluted a living legend, 100-year-old Betty Reed Soskin. And if you can just indulge me for a moment, I'll quickly read this. What she did, well, I'll just read the whole thing. At 100 years old, I'd like to introduce you to Betty Reed Soskin. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The oldest active National Park Ranger of the National Park Service. During World War II, Betty was a member of the Black Roses, the 600,000 African-American women who took jobs in U.S. factories to support the war effort. The experience would lead her to get involved in the planning of the Rosie the Riveter, or World War II Homefront National Historic Park in Richmond, California. The park tells the story of the largest wartime mobilization of women in American history. Concerned that the park wasn't adequately telling the story of the 600,000 Black Roses who fought discrimination to be part of the war effort, at the age of 85, she became a park ranger with the National Park Service, and there's a bit more on her. Now, that is an amazing achievement, and I commend her for it, and those are the sorts of people that I will always celebrate.
And I appreciate those, and I definitely think she should be commended. I also like the ones that Chris had, so that's who I'd actually defer to. But I appreciate yours as well, Shaquille. Chris, I'm turning it over to you.
Oh, these are both Air Force guys for me. Ed Dwight was the first African American who was nominated to be an astronaut, and it was a fighter pilot. He ended up not making the cut, which really shouldn't count, right? I mean, it shouldn't count from the standpoint that, yeah, at least he tried, right? He tried. He didn't make it, but he did try. Then 20 years later, Guy Bluford, he ends up piloting the Challenger. So another Air Force guy. So, I mean, it takes, it's a shame it took that long, but it's good that, here we have two firsts, right? The first Black astronaut candidate, and then the first Black astronaut in space. So I think that's pretty cool. So I just wanted to mention those two, and Air Force alumni. Go Air Force.
And go Air Force. Well, we have 6 more minutes, but I'll go ahead and well, actually, I'll wait. Is there anything else we want to talk about today?
There was one other quick news.
Yeah. Well, Sasha Sasha. Last time we were talking to Sasha, he was at the top of Everest after being dropped off in a helicopter that I'd arranged. Sasha, over to you.
For it, Sasha.
My question to you, Shaquille. Are you sure that helicopters can fly on the level of Mount Everest?
Well, Sasha, I'm not the one who's going to be in that helicopter, so for your sake, I bloody hope so.
Good question. Can they actually make it there? Speaking of which, I know that some of our founders are very much big into conspiracy theories and things of that nature. So, we just had a very sad incident that happened, and I'm sure that the conspiracy theories are going to be flying left and right because Bernie Madoff's sister and her husband apparently died in an apparent murder-suicide. So we do remember that was the person that was involved in the Ponzi scheme. And I'm sure that the suicide and the conspiracy theories are going to be flying left and right as to whether this was part of a grander conspiracy or whatever. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this as it just recently happened. But definitely that is, I'm sure, something that we're going to hear a lot of folks speculating on.
Sorry, to whom are you addressing that question?
Anybody.
I got nothing.
I work in finance. I'm not going to make any comment at all on that.
I got nothing.
Well, I do have something that y'all will both have something on. And I know Steve's got to wrap everything. Apparently, Biden and Putin have arranged to have a summit, and the summit is in the works. But there's a condition. The condition is that Putin doesn't invade the Ukraine. So that's a condition, but they are saying that there is a strong possibility that we will have this summit. So is the summit going to happen? Do we need to have the summit? We're always having summits between our Russian and our American leaders. So
let me tell you what my concern would be, and it has been for a while. When asked why America went into Afghanistan, Biden sort of stood there and just went, "We went there for 3 reasons. One," and he had to think about it. Whatever happens, someone will know. If conflict breaks out with Russia, and Russia says, right, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right, I'm going to point all of my nuclear weapons at you. And America says, right, well, we'll do the same thing and we'll all die together. standoff. And then the generals go up to Biden, and nobody else is allowed to know what the codes are, and says, Biden, type the code in. Biden's going to be sitting there on the keyboard going, and all of us in the West are gone at this point. That's what concerns me. What do you think, Lieutenant Colonel Chris?
Well, first of all, there is going to be a summit, and Putin will not invade during the summit. Then they'll talk, and they'll both agree in principle, and the French will walk away saying, peace in our time. And, there was never such a thing as Vichy France, and we didn't allow the Nazis to take over our country. And they're going to walk away, and then Putin will go back to Russia, and he'll tell his troops, hey, you know something? Let's not invade all the way to Kyiv. Let's just take Donetsk. We're just going to take Donetsk. We're going to put our people in there, and that's going to be it. That's their summit, and that's going to be it.
Absolutely. Well, it's time for closeout. I'm going to begin with just ending with some thoughts, and then I'm going to begin my monologue tomorrow. But I think something that I've observed, I've been reading a little bit about it, and I think it is quite concerning that what makes this invasion of the Ukraine, or potential invasion, very different than what's been going on in the world order for over 100 years. And, it's this whole notion of Pax Americana, this kind of concept that, military incursions will be for strategic interests, and we will not violate any international treaties or sovereignty of any nation. And, the closest analogies I have to invasions that I can remember, is the Hungary's in the 1950s, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the late 70s. But all of those invasions were not what we're seeing today, which is quite scary. And it's basically an autocratic government invading a weaker country that is a democracy. And I think this is something that we need to talk about tomorrow, is what does that mean? Because if that doesn't mean anything anymore, then is our world going to turn back into a power where a dictator can just roll the tanks in and take over an independent sovereign nation? This changes foreign policy. It changes what we teach in our political science courses across this country in our universities. Does democracy still matter? Does the free will and sovereignty of those who are living their lives in their own nation matter anymore? Or and I'll end with this: the people of Taiwan must be trembling as they watch and see what will happen, because if Vladimir Putin does decide to invade Ukraine, I think he's sending a message to the premier of China. Look, you've got a model to follow. Just go and take Taiwan. And what if this happens all around the world? We talk about World War III in 2034 with David M. Walker. I think World War III could possibly be a lot closer than we think if there's no respect for the independence and sovereignty of a nation. But we'll talk about that tomorrow on World Edition. We will see whether Putin will call the final move right in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. And on that note, we're getting ready to get out of here. And maybe tomorrow we'll also talk about what's going on with the new variant, because there is some concern about that as well. But right now, we're going to get on out of here and get on to another great show. I know some of y'all are heading over to talk about economy. So the Economics Monday will be going on, and they will have Media Monday at exactly 12 o'clock. So I know some of y'all are heading over to Economics Monday, and I know that'll be a lively discussion as well. So on that note, we're out of here.